you leave her right now? When Ted and I went into the examination room at the obstetrics and gynecology clinic, the doctor who looked at our faces alternately said something outrageous. Excuse me? Filled with shock and disgust at the doctor who blurted out such an inappropriate comment about someone's privacy. I was stunned. For some reason, Ted didn't question it or say anything. I was so bewildered that I couldn't move from where I was standing. Unleave who? Maybe this doctor had been dozing off. Maybe he'd had a weird dream and was just sleep-talking, saying something that made no sense at all. But then again, his eyes were looking straight at Ted and me. No, you misunderstood. It's him, your husband, said the doctor, his voice quietly burning with anger, and Ted's name came from his mouth, and Ted stared back at the doctor with a serious look on his face. My name is Nancy Johnson. I'm currently 30 and work as a nurse. I married Ted 5 years ago when I was 25, but given my nursing career, our living rhythms haven't quite matched up. Therefore, our marital life was unsatisfactory, and before we knew it, 5 years had passed without us having a child. Ted, for some reason, always said, "Don't worry, it'll happen eventually." As though he didn't really want children. Sure, at my age, it may be too early to worry. But I had been thinking since I was a child that I wanted 3 children when I got married, so it was true that I was becoming anxious about not having the first one soon. Ted is just an ordinary office worker. I shouldn't say it too loudly, but his salary isn't high. Even though he's been working since he was fresh out of college, raises are few, and without a promotion, there's no expectation of a significant salary increase. It might be a money thing. Maybe Ted doesn't want children yet. Plus lately, it seems to be a busy period at work, and he often works late. He comes home late at night, quite often. I wondered if he'd ever been this busy before, and when I asked Ted, he said that a new project had started and the busy periods had increased. Our living rhythms were increasingly mismatched, and I was starting to feel lonely. Ted was usually a gentle and husband. Apart from our different opinions about children, there was hardly anything I was dissatisfied with. So I never dreamed that something like that would happen. It was a year ago when I suggested to Ted that I wanted to start trying to conceive. Our marital life was stagnant back then, and I was feeling impatient. Many of my friends who were married already had children. Every time I saw updates about their children on social media, I think that's nice. And slowly that turned into envy, to the point where I was now jealous, so I'd stop checking social media as much. Because of that, I chose the timing just a year ago when Ted got back from work and told him I wanted to start trying to have a baby, trying to conceive. Isn't it something that can happen naturally? We don't need to make a big deal of it, do we? But that's not always the case. If the timing isn't right, it doesn't mean anything. That's what my friends were saying. That's just your friends' opinions, right? People's timing for having children can be different, so don't take it too seriously. But still, at that time, I didn't know much about trying to conceive, so I couldn't argue with Ted's reluctance. Even if the awareness of trying to conceive differs between men and women, he could have shown a little more cooperative attitude, couldn't he? Anyway, if you get too caught up in it, you might not be able to conceive even if you could. Let's just be patient. Yeah, I guess so. Certainly, as Ted says, when you get impatient, it feels like it's less likely to happen, and I had felt the same way. Feeling frustrated, I went off to work that night since I had the night shift. True at work during my break. I talked to a colleague about it, and she scolded me saying, "You can't be so easygoing about this." I was the one who wanted to be angry at Ted, so I was slightly annoyed by my colleague's words. "So what should I do?" I asked, and she advised, "Why don't you go to an OB-GYN? Why go to an OBSD when there's nothing wrong with me?" I hesitated, but she informed me. Nowadays, many women go to the OB-GYN right away when they want to have a baby. This was a new idea to me, and it was quite an eye-opener. My next day off is in 2 days. It's a weekday, so I thought I'd try going to the OB-GYN. So in 2 days, I decided to go to the nearest OB-GYN to my house. Of course, I kept it a secret from Ted. Although it was the closest, the OB was 2 train stations away, perhaps because there were few in number. It was a weekday morning, so I assumed it wouldn't be too crowded. But when I got to the OB-GYN, I was taken aback by the number of people. All the waiting room chairs were filled, and there were even pregnant women standing and waiting. Given the situation, I, of course, couldn't take a seat and leaned against the wall waiting my turn. I was finally called into the examination room, and I received an examination about an hour after arriving at the hospital. That day, the doctor told me to first try the timing method, punctuating our intimacy to coincide with my ovulation period, which seemed to be the first approach taken in trying to conceive. If this goes well, I could be expecting within a few months. I ruminated on what the doctor taught me, thinking about our future life. At least, I had to tell Ted about the timing method, since it was something that required cooperation between us as a couple. I determinedly talked to Ted that night. I said, and Ted turned his red, alcohol-flushed face to me, his eyes wide with surprise. I really wanted a child. The doctor suggested something called the timing method. I explained the timing method to Ted. A tipsy Ted didn't seem to be taking my words very seriously, but at least he didn't interrupt me. And, will you cooperate with me? I tried to choose my words, carefully not to offend Ted, but he scratched his head, looking bothered, and responded, "It feels like being forced, and I'm not into it at all. Isn't there another way?" Ted's insensitive words made my head spin. It took a lot of courage just to go to the EGM, and it was embarrassing to share our marital problems with a male doctor, even though he was a professional. Without knowing all the trouble I've been going through, and without distinguishing between what's appropriate and what's not, I felt like giving Ted a piece of my mind. But I knew that if we fought now, he would become even more uncooperative, so I held back. Other methods can cost quite a bit of money, so they said to start with the method that doesn't cost anything. Please, will you cooperate with me? Even Ted seemed troubled by the mention of the expense, and though reluctantly, he agreed to try the method the doctor had suggested. Convincing Ted was an exhausting task in itself, and I was apprehensive about what lay ahead. A year had almost passed since we started trying to have a baby. Not only was Ted completely unmotivated from the beginning, but our lifestyles didn't match, and things didn't go well. In addition, whether he was disgusted by being forced into marital life, Ted often didn't come home on the scheduled day, with only one chance a month. I felt like crying, but I couldn't lash out at Ted because it would only make him lose interest. Stress caused my period to be late, and I even had to get medication from the doctor. When will I have a child? I couldn't help feeling weak and complained in front of the doctor. I can't say for sure, but if you follow my instructions, the odds will be much higher. The doctor listened seriously to my concerns and even gave advice on how to get Ted to cooperate. I was grateful, but also irritated by why Ted wouldn't cooperate with me. That night, it was the once-a-month chance, so I had resolved to invite Ted. But Ted didn't come away even as the date changed. I had a day shift the next day, so I didn't want to stay up too late. Just as I sighed and was about to give up, Ted finally came home. I was about to give up and go to sleep when I finally heard the front door open. It was almost 1 a.m. "I'm home," he announced as he entered the living room, laughing sloppily, possibly drunk, and slurring his words. I was taken aback by Ted's overly carefree attitude. "Do you remember what today is?" I hesitated to ask, but I knew I had to be clear for Ted to understand. I confronted Ted with determination. Today. What day was it?" Perhaps he finally remembered when he saw my serious expression, and he lazily narrowed his eyes. "If you didn't like it, you should have called. I was waiting all this time." I couldn't help but recall all the difficulties we had faced and expressed my dissatisfaction to Ted. "You knows, I've been thinking," I said. Ted's eyes narrowed, snake-like. I'm under so much pressure. I'm told every month to keep the schedule free. Put yourself in my shoes. Coming home tired from work? Frankly, I don't want it to be with you right now. I was shocked by Ted's words. Indeed, I had been pressuring Ted to keep the schedule free every month. If the ways were reversed. But I had been making requests to Ted as gently as possible so as not to burden him too much. I was holding back what I really wanted to say, which was to take this more seriously. Still, seeing Ted, who assumed he was the only one struggling, made me feel miserable. "Well, let's take a break for a while," I suggested. I felt that if we continued this way, it would only increase the burden on both of us. I proposed a temporary truce, and Ted seemed relieved, saying, "That's fine then." I felt faint at the thought of when we might be able to have a child. 3 months after I told Ted about the truce, he seemed to be relieved from the pressure of trying to conceive, and he began going out to play on his days off. He would leave in the morning and not return until night, and I wondered what he was doing. Ted doesn't have any particular hobbies, so I assumed he was out with friends. That was how Ted had been, but whether this truce had worked or not, he began to take part in our marital life on his own. And just 3 months after we resumed our marital life, my pregnancy was discovered. I was overwhelmed with emotion when I saw the positive result of the pregnancy test. I reported to Ted right away. Oh, that's great. Ted's reaction was unexpectedly disappointing. What's wrong? Aren't you happy? Even though Ted usually doesn't express a desire for children, I thought he would be happy to have his own child, but he looked somewhat troubled. Of course, I'm happy, but we really don't know if you're pregnant until we see the doctor, right? Yes, maybe we should go to the hospital. The hospital next week. Then I'll drive you there. Let's go to the hospital together. At the gate for the first time in a while, I saw Ted's gentle side and was relieved. Perhaps Ted was happy too. He might be holding back his joy until the pregnancy was confirmed at the hospital. With that in mind, Ted's reaction seemed reasonable. And a week later, as planned, Ted drove me to the hospital. It was the obstetrics and gynecology clinic I regularly visit. We checked in and waited in the waiting room for our turn. I finished having my blood pressure taken and a urine test, and then entered the examination room with Ted. Inside the examination room, the doctor was looking at my medical chart. The nurse urged Ted and me to sit down, and then, possibly busy, retreated to the back of the room. Left in the examination room were Ted, the doctor, and me. When the doctor looked up at Ted and me, he somehow opened his eyes wide. Wondering if there was something strange on our faces, we looked at each other but saw nothing out of the ordinary. You're Mrs. Johnson, correct? Yes. I always have my appointments here. That's right. Is something wrong? I'm not pregnant, am I? You are pregnant. Well, congratulations. But there's something else. The doctor looked at me with a meaningful expression, then his gaze fixed on Ted. And after staring intently at Ted's face for several seconds, he let out a breath and opened his mouth. Hey, you leave her right now? What? I was filled with surprise and disgust at the doctor's rude intrusion into our privacy. Ted, for some reason, did not respond. I was so confused that I could not move from the spot. Thank you. Cool rest. Could it be that the doctor had been dozing off until now? Maybe he'd had a weird dream and was still half asleep, blurting out something unrelated. But his eyes were fixed intently on Ted and me. No, you misunderstand. It's your husband. The doctor's name for Ted came out of his quietly angry mouth, and Ted stared back at him, expressionless. I know this isn't something I should say as a doctor. I'm sorry, but I felt I had to tell you. Mrs. Johnson. This doctor knew about my struggles, including my desperate desire to have a child. That's why he said something so rude. There must be an extraordinary reason. Seeing the doctor's sincere look, I decided to listen to what he had to say. What exactly are you talking about? Anyway, I had to hear his side of the story. I was ready to hear what the doctor had to say, my ear attuned to him. It's a very private matter, but I found out recently that my wife was cheating on me. I was in shock and disoriented for a while. But because of my profession, I couldn't easily take time off, so I continued working, pretending to be calm. My wife denied the affair, but I was not convinced, so I hired a private investigator to look for evidence. I couldn't predict how the doctor said in story about his wife's infidelity related to us, and I stood still, unable to move from my spot. Ted, as usual, was expressionless, listening to the doctor's words. I couldn't understand what Ted was thinking right now. The results were devastating. But within a week, evidence of my wife's infidelity came flooding in. Pictures of her arm in arm with her lover entering the hotel, exchanges of messages with the lover, phone call histories. They just kept coming. By that time, I'd had enough and didn't want to hear any more from the investigator. And then, the doctor looked at Ted again. His eyes turned hateful. I instinctively covered my mouth and at the same time cradled my belly. I had a premonition that once I heard what came next, there would be no going back. My wife's lover was Ted Johnson, your husband. The doctor's words fell sharply into my gut, leaving me in despair. When the two of you walked into the examination room, I felt as if I'd been struck dumb. But the face I had seen in photographs as my wife's lover was right before my eyes. And to think that it was Mrs. Johnson's husband. I never would have believed my wife was cheating on me. Is that true, honey? I didn't want to hear it, but I couldn't help myself, nor could the doctor. Both our fates were in Ted's hands, and I felt sick to my stomach. Ted was silent for a while, perhaps looking for some room to defend himself. But realizing that the doctor and I were staring at him intently, he finally burst out laughing. It's true. I'll just say it now. I don't love Nancy anymore. I'm tired of trying for a baby. Trying for a baby? If she really wanted a child, she should have taken a more certain approach. But she didn't even do that. Coming home from work only to be pressured when I'm tired, and that's when I met her. She was always complaining about her husband being away from home for work. But I never thought her husband would be Nancy's doctor. Pitted, unabashed, admitted to having an affair with the doctor's wife. I'm sure the doctor and I are feeling the same way right now. How can you betray someone so calmly? Ted is not only trying to ruin me, but the doctor's family as well. I was filled with an unforgiving feeling towards Ted. Tidetch, I may have been wrong to make you feel like I was forcing you into trying for a baby, and for that, I'm sorry. But that's separate from the affair, isn't it? I'm the victim here. I almost want to be paid for my suffering. You're gonna pay, right? You, the doctor, should also pay, since your wife ran to the affair because of stress. Shin at this moment, Pidet, insisting on his right to compensation without admitting his guilt, began to unravel. Being pressured to have a baby was nothing compared to the fact that he cheated for that reason, which is absolutely unacceptable. Do you know what you're saying? I couldn't hold back any longer. Till now, I had been considerate of Ted, who had been kind in all aspects except for trying for a baby. But after being told all this, I couldn't stay silent. I'd reached my breaking point. Of course you'll be the one to pay. Yes, waking. I can't believe you cheated, knowing that we had a child on the way. I have a responsibility to raise this child now, and I'll have you take responsibility as well. Not just splitting assets, but also making sure you pay child support. Huh. You can say that, but I don't have any money. Then borrow or do whatever you have to do. I'm willing to consult with a lawyer. You won't stand a chance then. If it's compensation for emotional damage, I'll claim it for my wife too. You two can pay us back together. You two will end up getting married anyways. Both the doctor and I, planning to break up with our cheating partners, confronted Ted together. Finally, Ted gave in to my logical argument and left the examination room. I'm truly sorry for my husband's actions. No, my wife is the one to blame, especially since you just found out about a new life being born. No, this child doesn't need that father. I'm glad I found out before it was born. Thank you. Though the betrayal and frustration were undeniable, it felt like this doctor had helped me in my private matters as well. It'll be tough from here on, but please feel free to consult with me anytime. I'll help as much as I can. The doctor's kind consideration made me tear up. The pain was the same for both of us, the doctor and me. As comrades, we looked at each other for a while, comforting each other's wounds. Many things happened that day. My pregnancy was confirmed without any problems, and I was told, please come for a checkup again in a few weeks. Before I left, when I left the examination room, there were many patients waiting, and though I felt sorry for them, I couldn't afford to think of others right now. But Ted had gone home already, so I had no choice but to take the train home. Feeling lonely, but also thinking about the new life inside me, I felt encouraged. We'll get through this together. As I stroked my belly, the still very small life inside seemed to be watching over me, and I felt happy. When I got home, Ted was gone, and a divorce lawyer's business card was left on the dining table. I had already decided to divorce Ted, so without resistance, I called the number written on it. Ted thinks he can get alimony from me, but as I told him earlier, I'm the one who's gonna get the alimony. I'll make sure to demand child support as well. I promptly began preparing to consult a lawyer. I, of course, won overwhelmingly in the divorce negotiations with Ted. It's Ted's fault in the first place. It was a mistake for him to try to take alimony from me. When I presented the various evidence of infidelity that I received from the OBGYN, could only stammer without any excuses. I demanded a $100,000 lump sum for child support, in addition to the property settlement. Wait, all at once. He complained, but knowing Ted, he might stop transferring the money halfway through if I asked for a monthly amount. That's why I decided to demand it all at once to make him feel the weight of his guilt. It seems the doctor also divorced his wife and demanded alimony. The doctor's wife, possibly just now noticing the difference between Ted's salary and the doctor's, and given that Ted was made to pay child support in a lump sum, seems to be having financial troubles with Ted. She reportedly appealed to the doctor saying, I want to come back to you. But the doctor firmly refused to return to the previous relationship. Once betrayed, a relationship can never be mended. He answered, disgusted. I agree with his opinion. It's too selfish to expect to return to the old relationship after causing so much trouble. I hope Ted and the woman suffer for a while for breaking up other families. We're like comrades, aren't we? Yes, if you don't mind, would you like to go for tea sometime? Anytime you're free. I surprisingly didn't feel uncomfortable at the doctor's invitation. It must be because he's treating me in a gentlemanly manner. I must stop fantasizing that maybe someday something could happen with this doctor, and now just hope that my unborn child grows healthy and is born safely. I made a special apple juice just for you. You're gonna drink it, right? Saying this, my mother-in-law, with a determined smile, offers me a glass. We had brought our child for the first time to my husband's family's home after giving birth, and she handed me a cute little glass filled with plenty of apple juice. I took it and went to the kitchen, only to pour the contents down the sink. Miss, what are you doing? If you didn't want it, you could have just said so, but to throw it away right in front of me. I slowly turned around to my mother-in-law's scream. When our eyes met, she seemed to falter for a moment, but then clung to my stunned husband, berating how terrible a woman I was. Mrs. Grubb, I called her in a deliberately low voice, and she visibly flinched, her shoulders jerking as if she was hiding something. Cheers at steeple, I held back a sigh. Mrs. Grubb, this isn't apple juice, is it? It's really this. I married my husband of the same age, Mike, after a year of dating 3 years ago. We are a working couple. I've continued working as an employee at a general company since graduating, even after getting married. In the midst of all this, I was able to get pregnant with our long-awaited baby last year, so I decided to take maternity leave. Mike took very good care of me while I was pregnant, doing most of the housework during my morning sickness. He struggled with cooking, which he wasn't good at, but I'm really grateful to him. We were able to have a healthy baby boy just the other day. We named him Tim. Mike, who attended the birth, cried with joy when he saw Tim. He's so cute, like an angel. Amy, thank you so much for all the hard work. Mike, you're crying too much. Mike's life began with Mike, time, and me, and I was filled with happiness. Mike was a good husband and a good father. He was very proactive with housework and childcare, blessed with a kind husband and a cute child. I was spending peaceful and calm days. But there was one big concern. It was my in-laws, who lived an hour's drive from our house. My in-laws are both retired, and they seem to have received a lot of retirement money, so they travel abroad all the time. Traveling abroad is not a problem at all, but they always buy a lot of sweets for souvenirs. Generally, this might be a pleasant thing, but I have a peanut allergy, so I'm very particular about what I eat. I once accidentally ate a peanut-containing sweet and suffered from respiratory distress. So I explained to my in-laws about the allergy and asked them to avoid food but Mr. Grubb. Mrs. Grubb, I told you before, I have a peanut allergy, so I'd like you to avoid things like chocolate that might contain peanuts. I can't always tell what's in foreign products by looking at the ingredients. What are you talking about? The best Southerners are local food. There are many things you can't easily eat here. And yet you complain, isn't that a bit too much? She is right. We want you guys to eat local food too, but to complain without eating it, isn't that rude? Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law had no understanding of allergies, and they scolded me, even when Mike said to them, "You're both taking this allergy thing too lightly." If it accidentally goes into her mouth, it can turn into something serious. In the worst case, it could be irreparable. Please take it more seriously. They didn't listen. Moreover, my in-laws travel many times in a short period, and they hand over the souvenirs all at once. Since they sometimes give me things they bought months ago, there are often items past their expiration date. Hey Dad, Mom, this has expired again. Don't send us stuff like this. At Mike's pointing, my in-laws make a face as if they don't understand what the big deal is. It's a best before date, not an expiration date. It's not spoiled, so don't be so uptight about it. Even though it's something sent to her son, my mother-in-law thinks it's no big deal, laughing and saying, "It's just fine." Like you're being too strict. She shows no remorse. This has added to our estrangement with my in-laws. We did report the birth of our child, but since they were on an overseas trip, we hadn't yet introduced Tim to his grandparents. They're coming back from their trip tomorrow, and we've agreed to go visit them at their house next weekend as a family of 3. When the weekend came, we headed for the in-laws' house by car. It isn't Mike and Amy, it's been a while. Come on in, come on in. My mother-in-law welcomed us with a smile, and my father-in-law also greeted us warmly, saying, "Glad you could come." They were both very excited to meet their first grandchild for the first time and had smiles on their faces, saying, "He's adorable." So far, everything was going smoothly, and I was glad we were able to introduce Tim to his grandparents. Soon after, my mother-in-law asked, "Amy, would you like some juice?" Feeling a little startled, I asked just to be sure, what kind of juice is it? My mother-in-law replied with a big smile, apple juice, my homemade one. It's really delicious, and I want you to try it. Thinking apple juice should be fine, there shouldn't be any peanuts in it. I was relieved. If it's apple juice, I'll have some. Homemade by you, that's amazing. Thank you. Just wait a moment. My mother-in-law then went to the kitchen and came back after a while. Here you go. I poured it into a glass for you. She handed me the glass of apple juice. I said thank you and accepted it, but immediately noticed something off. Something was off and I got up and headed for the kitchen. Mike asked, puzzled, but I silently poured the entire contents of the glass down the sink. Amy, what are you doing? Throwing away the drink like that? Apologize to Mom, Mike said, filled with shock and anger. My mother-in-law was also furious, saying to throw it away after I went to the trouble of preparing it. What's the meaning of this? It's my homemade juice. How could you? I calmly told Mike, I would have died if I drank this. No way. Mike was stunned and seemed to grasp the situation, turning pale. He asked his mother, trembling, Mom, what was the drink you gave to Amy? Wasn't it just apple juice? His mother answered nonchalantly, I told you it's my homemade apple juice. There's also peanut liqueur in it. It's a cocktail. My husband, in disbelief, let out an incredulous cry. I was aghast, saying, I knew it. I smelled peanuts in peanut liqueur of all things. Yes, I had been certain that there were peanuts in the drink when I put the glass to my lips, as I had strongly smelled peanuts. I hadn't thought it was alcohol, I told my mother-in-law. She snorted and said, what's the big deal? You're mixing peanut liqueur with apple juice is delicious. I heard it from the locals. This peanut liqueur is a souvenir from our overseas trip. You should be grateful to drink it. Mike was furious and yelled at his mother. On top of it, serving alcohol to a woman who has just given birth. Are you out of your mind? She's breastfeeding Tim. Anyone would know that. You've raised kids yourself. I just can't trust you anymore. Mike gets beside himself with anger and sadness. Oh, come on. Mike, don't be so angry, she says. Even the father-in-law says, come on. Mike, don't get so angry. Amy isn't drinking, so it's fine, nonchalantly. After all, peanut liqueur isn't the same as peanuts themselves. You're making a big deal out of it. Mike, when did you become so naggy? Maybe it's because of Amy. And it's fine to have a little alcohol while breastfeeding. These kids are so neurotic. It's driving me nuts. The mother-in-law speaks with a snide tone. It's like they don't understand allergies at all. I calmly explained to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Grubb, peanut liqueur is obviously made from peanuts. So if I, who have a peanut allergy, were to consume it, I could have a severe allergic reaction. Severe allergic reaction called anaphylactic shock. I've explained the allergic reaction over and over, but she doesn't seem to understand at all. What's anaphylactic? I think I've heard of it before, but it's a bit complicated and I don't really understand. I just wanted you to enjoy it because it's delicious. Why do I have to be blamed? It's terrible. My mother-in-law covers her face as if she's the victim. I also explained to her the risks of alcohol while breastfeeding. Mrs. Grubb, please listen carefully. Drinking alcohol while breastfeeding can transfer the alcohol to the breast milk, and it might harm Tim's health. I've heard that alcohol can reduce the quality of breast milk, and I don't want to drink it. So please don't do this ever again. I'm really begging you. You're such a nag. Enough already. Honey, help. Mike and Amy are both accusing me. My mother-in-law seeks help from my father-in-law, and he takes her side, saying, Mike, Amy, let's leave it at that. She didn't mean any harm. Then why? Mom, did you lie and say it was just apple juice? Why did you call alcohol juice? Trying to deceive and make Amy drink that. Don't mess with us. Both of you are out of your minds. Mike shouts in anger. His father yells back at him. What's that tone towards your parents? Like apologies now? That's it? I'm cutting ties with you both. I'll never see you again, and you'll never see Tim again either. Mike makes a declaration of severance, and his parents retaliate. Then you're no son of ours anymore? Just get out of this house. Yeah, get out. Won't ever cross our threshold again. Mike says I don't need to be told that. Amy, let's go. I pick up Tim, and the three of us head for the front door. As we leave, my in-laws continue to say, this is all an exaggeration. What's an allergy anyway? It's just being spoiled. We ignore them and leave their house. That is Kankara on the way home. My Mike apologizes to me. Amy, I'm really sorry. I so much to apologize for. Next, I'm sorry for yelling when you threw away the drink. I'm really sorry for yelling without even asking why you did that. And for my mother doing such a thing. It's not something that can be forgiven with an apology, but I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Mike. But cutting ties with your parents, was it the right thing to do? We've been estranged before, but yeah, of course. I couldn't continue the relationship after what happened. And what would happen if you'd been deceived into drinking it today? I chose to cut ties to protect you and Tim. Mike said, looking very dependable in my eyes. Thank you. Honestly, I was also feeling that continuing the relationship with your father and mother was impossible, so I was a little relieved when you made the declaration to sever ties. I smiled, feeling lighter at the thought that we wouldn't have to worry about my in-laws anymore. Still, why are my parents so ignorant about allergies? No matter how many times I explain it, they don't get it, or rather, they don't want to get it. Mike wonders. You probably think of it as the same kind of thing as liking or disliking food, or they even said that allergies are just being spoiled. Yeah, it's scary to think that they could cause trouble in the future. Being so ignorant, well, it doesn't matter anymore since we've cut ties. Oh, I should tell Aunt Christy, who lives near my parents' house, that we've cut ties. Aunt Christy lives near Mike's parents' house, and I've met her a few times. She's cheerful and very nice. Yeah, it might be best to let her know. Yep, I'll call her tomorrow. And so we returned home to our peaceful daily lives. A few months later, a call came through to me. It was during a weekday afternoon when Mike was at work, and I was playing with Tim. Since it was from an unregistered number, I answered it, wondering who it could be. Hello, Demi. It's been a while, it's me. Hey, Christy, I'm sorry for calling so suddenly. The call was from Aunt Christy. Oh, Aunt Christy, it's been a long time. Sorry for calling you all of a sudden. I just called Mike and got your number from him. I already talked to Mike, but something serious has happened. Something serious? Well, the story I heard from Aunt Christy was shocking. My mother-in-law had been sued, it turns out. Apparently, she had intended to give us a lot of souvenirs from our overseas trip, the day we cut ties with her, but because of what had happened, she was unable to do so. She'd given out treats and other souvenirs to neighbors. However, the unmanaged and long-neglected souvenirs had expired and spoiled. Some of the neighbors who ate them without knowing this fell ill from stomach pains, and some even collapsed from allergic shock. How could this happen? I was so surprised that I lost my words. Yes, that's what happened. Apparently, she's being sued by a neighbor, and I heard it from Kate. Kate is the mother-in-law's name? And Aunt Christy is her sister. Did my mother-in-law know that the neighbor had allergies? It seems she did know. The neighbor was allergic to walnuts, and she confirmed with Kate that there were no walnuts in these gifts. But she lied about it. Now, it's just like something my mother-in-law would do. She probably thought an allergy was like a simple dislike. So now it's a big problem, and she's being sued for deliberately causing harm. I'm really shocked, and I've decided to cut ties with Kate too. She's apparently being sued for quite a bit of money, so she might call you for help, so I wanted to tell you first. I see. Thank you very much for contacting me. Don't feel obligated to help if she calls. It's all her own fault. Take care of yourself. Thank you. It's been hot lately, so Aunt Christy, take care of yourself as well. And so we hung up. That night when Mike returned home, he looked exhausted and asked if I had heard from Aunt Christy. Yes, you mean about your mom? I thought she might cause trouble someday, but I never thought it'd come to this. It was the right decision to cue and Tim away from her. I wonder if the neighbors are okay, especially the one with the walnut allergy. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to have been too serious. My mother really did something unbelievable. But I'm not gonna help her, and she needs to reflect on what she did. Amy, you can ignore her if she calls. She'll probably ask for money, just as Mike said. I earnestly hoped my mother-in-law would reflect on her actions. A few days later, as Aunt Christy and Mike had predicted, a call came from my mother-in-law asking for help. At first, I ignored it, but the incessant ringing finally forced me to answer. Hello? Amy, listen to me. I'm being sued even though I didn't do anything wrong. Don't you feel sorry for me? My mother-in-law seemed to have no remorse. She was saying that she had done nothing wrong, and her lack of understanding about what was truly wrong was frightening. We've cut ties, so please don't call again. Goodbye. I said coldly, about to hang up, but my mother-in-law hastily stopped me. Wait. Don't hang up yet. Please lend me some money. I'm in trouble. You've been traveling abroad a lot, so you must have some money. I've spent so much on overseas trips, and I don't have much savings left. And if I pay the compensation, I'll be broke and unable to live. Mike won't answer my calls, or even over the phone. I could tell she was getting desperate. Even if you say that, there's nothing I can do. I can't lend you a single cent. Do you really think I'm going to help you after what you did? I'll apologize. I was wrong. I'm sorry, okay? Just lend me some money, even a little. My mother-in-law apologized with a reckless and indifferent attitude. There's no value in an insincere apology. Pay the neighbors the compensation they deserve, and apologize properly. Goodbye. I firmly told her and hung up the phone. After that, my mother-in-law somehow paid the compensation, and my in-laws, who were left penniless, put their family home up for sale. But since it was a very old house, they couldn't sell it for a decent amount of money. My in-laws had to move to a rundown apartment, and many hardships awaited them. Their retirement savings were gone, and they no longer had the means to travel abroad. Both of my in-laws started working part-time jobs, diligently working every day to somehow make ends meet. But they no longer have a carefree life, and it seems like they're under a lot of stress. The once happy couple's faces have turned sour, and my father-in-law yells at my mother-in-law, saying it's all your fault, and apparently that yelling can be heard outside the apartment. My mother-in-law has been calling and emailing frequently, complaining, "Your father-in-law said such horrible things to me. He used to be so kind. Can you believe how awful this is? We're fighting every day, and it's like hell." But since it's become quite annoying, Mike and I have blocked calls from my in-laws. Meanwhile, we're moving near my parents' home and we'll be relocating. And we found out that I'm pregnant with our second child. Of course, we have no intention of letting my in-laws meet our child. We are living peacefully, and our whole family is eagerly waiting for the birth of our second child. And one day, I received a call from my son. "Where's Dad? Do you need something? Your father is now working at the headquarters, staying at the company's dormitory." My son, Michael, 23, who left home when he went to college, was silent for a while and then began to speak hesitantly. "Dad's company doesn't have a dormitory." "How do you know that?" Michael right to Michael's explanation. When he was job hunting, he attended a joint information session. My husband's company was also participating there, and other students were asking if there was a dormitory. He seemed to remember that. Why would he lie about going to a bachelor's dormitory? I wonder. I became worried. Michael's silence continued. "Do you know something?" Michael experienced. "It's a bit hard to say, but it seems like Dad is cheating. Are you sure you didn't see it wrong? I understand how you feel. But it was definitely Dad." Now it was my turn to be silent. I don't know what to say. I'm at a loss for words. The hand holding the receiver is trembling. I'm Trisha Johnson, 43 years old, a full-time housewife. I live with my husband, David, 45. My son Michael, 23, left home when he went to college. I get along well with my in-laws, and they occasionally visit our home. According to my friends, particularly having the mother-in-law come to the house can be unpleasant. I don't mind it, and it's nice to have various conversations. My father-in-law, Robert, 68, and my mother-in-law, Susan, 67, are on good terms and often go out together. They never fail to take their daily walks for health. Today, my in-laws are coming to visit on their walk, buying some traditional sweets from a nearby American pastry shop. I love those sweets, so I can't help but feel relieved. I brew some of our best tea for the guests and enjoy the sweets with my parents-in-law. Eating something delicious makes everyone smile. Michael called the other day. He seems to be doing well. I wonder how he's doing as a working person. I'm worried. Michael will be fine. He's responsible and a caring person. He's the type that everyone loves. I hope so. Patricia, I know you're worried, but Michael is a fine adult now. Michael's always been close to them. Since college, he has been regularly contacting his grandparents. He's a thoughtful child. He always calls me at 8:50 p.m. I wondered why. He probably watches TV dramas from 9 p.m., right? So he calls during the commercial break. If it's past 9, it's in the middle of the drama, and that would be inconvenient. I thought that made sense. He was being that considerate. I think he'll do well in the company. That night, I told my husband that his parents had come over, but his reaction was indifferent. I can't help but think sarcastically. Is he still in his rebellious phase? He doesn't seem to get along well with his in-laws. He ended the conversation with a simple, "I see," and that was it. My in-laws are friendly and gentle. It's hard to believe that my husband came from these parents. When we were dating, he was always smiling and he was always a gentleman. He would always walk on the street side when we were out together. But my husband changed completely the moment we got married. Just with an arrogant tone, he almost says, "Such an arrogant attitude? I don't know if my deceiving husband is the bad one, or if I was foolish not to see through him. I think the only thing keeping us together now is our child. But strangely, my husband seems in a good mood today. I got a position at the main office in the spring personnel changes. I had communications about my luck is finally turning around. That's good for you." I was also pleased for another reason. I thought he might increase our living expenses if his salary went up. My husband hands me only the living expenses, and he takes care of the financial management himself. I don't even know how much he earns. Up until now, we've been living with no margin, just getting by. I thought we could have a little better life now. But that hope was shattered with words I didn't expect. For the time being, I decided to move into the company's dormitory. It's too far for commuting from here, and renting a room costs money. I have no objection to my husband's transfer, and I'm all for it. You'll be on your own, so I'm gonna cut back on the money a little. I've had my own living expenses, so this should be enough. The amount he mentioned is less than half of what we have now. I can't make ends meet with that. If you need more money, you can do whatever you like, part-time work or whatever. I was dumbfounded and speechless. You don't have to come to see me unnecessarily. It's a waste of train fare, and basically, women are not allowed. I'd even want to visit him, but the real issue is that cutting the living expenses in half is absurd. You're getting promoted, right? Why are you cutting back on living expenses? This is strange. I'm not saying I won't give you living expenses. So you don't need it, do you? I had no choice but to remain silent at that. Who would want to visit such a horrible husband? I thought. But I didn't realize that this was a sneaky way for him to discourage me from visiting him. I reluctantly decided to work part-time. Otherwise, I would not have enough for my own food. I visited the local employment office for the first time. Many people were gathered, looking for work. I printed out the details of a company I was interested in and waited my turn. I must have waited for nearly an hour. Finally, it was my turn. They contacted the other party from me. They said they would interview me right away. It was only one stop away from home and convenient for commuting. The place I asked for was a small office in a mixed-use building. When I knocked on the door and entered, it was quite different from the office I had imagined. It had a down-to-earth atmosphere. He introduced himself as Bob, and I felt he was just my type. I honestly told him that I hadn't worked since I got married and that I was anxious. Bob said, "Everyone is kind here, so if anything happens, just tell me." There were a few simple questions, and it was decided that I would contact them later. I left the office, and I was contacted for employment immediately. The job was simple clerical work, and the senior lady was a friendly person. Especially Bob, who interviewed me, took care of me, and often spoke to me. He doesn't seem to be much older, and he was a very easy person to talk to. It's on the way home. I stopped by a coffee shop for tea, or decided to enjoy living alone. But telling my husband about the current situation was a mistake. He continued to control me. In the evening, he calls home. If I don't answer the next day, he'll nag and ask, "Why didn't you answer?" Seeing worse success today, even if I answer once, the phone rings irregularly 2 or 3 times an hour or 30 minutes later. I became frustrated. I couldn't leave the house in the evening. He's not gonna give me any freedom. Then one day, a call came from Michael. "Where's Dad now?" If it's Dad, he's working at the head office and is in the company's dormitory, I said, and Michael was silent for a while and then began to speak in a hesitant tone. Later, according to Michael's explanation, he had attended a joint company briefing session when he was job hunting. My husband's company was also participating, and other students were asking if there was a dormitory. According to the company's explanation, there is no dormitory, but housing assistance is provided. The person in charge said, "I wonder why he lied about going to a dormitory." I became anxious. Michael's silence continues. "Do you know something? Michael, it's Pele? It's a bit hard to say, but it looks like Dad is cheating." Just when I thought he had finally started talking, he began to say something outrageous. Today he was making sales rounds with his senior. "Next, we'll go to this company." The company his senior indicated was the company my husband works at. He might run into his dad. He wondered what face he should make if he met him. My husband and Michael don't get along. They've been on bad terms since Michael's rebellious phase. Today's visit was just to say hello to the sales manager. The meeting ended quickly, and it's past 5 in the evening. His senior is going straight home, so he said, "You can go home too." Michael, even though he doesn't get along with his father, thought he might have business connections. So he thought he should say hello as a working adult. Michael, not knowing whether he could see his father, waited in front of the company for a while for his father to come out. He saw someone who looked like his father, so he tried to call out to him. But a young woman ran after his father. My husband, with a smile I've never seen at home, started walking with the woman. Michael thought something was suspicious and hid. The woman appeared to be about the same age as Michael. She was said to be beautiful and had a good figure. Without noticing, Michael's father walked with that woman, aiming for the city at night. They went into an upscale restaurant, and after about an hour, went into a trendy bar. He was following them with a detective's feeling, but had to be careful not to be found. Besides, he had to be there for a long time without looking unnatural, and it was tough. And then comes the problem. Unfortunately, the two disappeared into a hotel. I was shaken by Michael's story. "Didn't you mistake him for someone else?" "I know how you feel, Mom, but it was definitely Dad." Now it was my turn to be silent. What should I say? I can't find the words. My hand holding the receiver is shaking. My husband is cheating, and with a woman the same age as my son. My mind goes blank. "Mom, it's okay. I'll take care of it, so pretend you don't know for a while. Do you have something in mind? I won't leave Dad like this. I won't forgive him for making Mom sad." I was glad to hear Michael's strong words. The only person I can rely on now is my son. Almost a month has passed since then. During that time, there was no contact from Michael, and I became anxious. I continued to receive regular communications from my husband. David, as usual. I wanted to confront him about his affair, but I said nothing, just as Michael advised. The thought of a young woman, particularly one around Michael's age, going to a hotel with David makes my head spin in anger. I dream of the two of them mocking me. "You're no longer needed, old hag. Just go away and don't appear in front of us. I don't want to see your miserable face anymore." How many times have I had the same dream? Each time, I wake up groaning, given that work. I find myself dozing off. "Patricia, you look pale. Are you feeling unwell?" "I haven't been sleeping well lately. I'm sleep deprived." "You must have insomnia. Is something bothering you?" I couldn't tell the truth and gave only vague answers. He had bought presents for everyone with his first paycheck and wanted to throw a party. It seems he wants to gather at his grandparents' house over the weekend and hand out the presents. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, but I'm glad. I feel that Michael has really become an adult now. I can't give you anything grand, but look forward to it. David hasn't mentioned anything about his affair. I didn't bring it up either, as I didn't want to dampen the celebration. On the day, I went to my parents' house early to help prepare the food for the party. I can't believe he's already working. It feels like he was just carrying his school backpack yesterday. Time flies. We're also getting older before we know it. I feel like Michael's birth was just yesterday. What his grandparents are saying feels very real. David is apparently coming that day too. It's been months since we last met. Should I confront him about the affair? I agonize over it. We line up the dishes that my mother-in-law and I made on the table. The doorbell rings, and it's Michael. "You're early." Grandpa and Grandma have been eagerly waiting. Michael, whom I haven't seen in a while, looks a bit more mature. He seems to have tightened up now that he's out in the world. "You must be tired. Come in and rest." His grandparents are overjoyed that Michael has come. Even his grandfather came out to greet him at the door. "I'm glad everyone looks well. Thank you for preparing everything today." Michael is ushered into the living room, surrounded by us. While I'm preparing drinks for everyone, Michael is bombarded with questions. "Have you gotten used to her? Are your seniors not bullying you? Are you eating properly?" His grandparents have a mountain of questions, firing them off rapidly. Michael answers without a hint of annoyance. "My seniors are caring, and I'm gradually being entrusted with work. I'm getting along with everyone." Knowing that Michael has settled into his company, his grandparents seemed relieved. But David sure is late. The food is gonna get cold. Speak of the devil, the doorbell rings again. Answering it, it's indeed David. "I'm sorry for being late, but just wouldn't end." David apologizes. Dinner is ready. I cooked, focusing on Michael's favorite dishes. In contrast, my husband David is eating with a displeased expression on his face. Dinner is over and we move to the living room. The time has come for Michael to distribute the presents. First to Grandpa and Grandma, here's this. What Michael handed to Robert, my father-in-law, was a slender box with a ribbon attached. What could it be? Let's open it. Go ahead, go ahead. It's something Grandpa wanted. Out came a fountain pen from a famous overseas brand. Robert often has occasions to write, and I heard he's been yearning for this pen. I'm impressed that Michael remembered such a conversation. A Japanese fan was sent to my grandmother-in-law. A delicate design is carved into it. It looks quite luxurious. It's a must-have in the summer, right? Be careful with heat stroke. Tears slightly welled up in my in-laws' eyes. We'll take good care of it. We'll treasure it. Don't just store it away because it's so precious. It's meaningless if you don't use it. We understand. We'll definitely use it. This is for you, Mom. It was an elegant brooch. I'll find something that matches this brooch. I feel like tears are going to overflow. My husband David was watching us with cold eyes. I wonder what you're gonna give me. I'm looking forward to it. Then, Michael's expression changed dramatically. This is for you, Dad. And Michael handed David a large envelope. David spread the contents of the envelope on the table with a puzzled look. Several photos came out. As soon as he saw those pictures, the blood drained from David's face. He tried to hide the photos in a hurry, but it was already too late. What is this? David glared at Michael. It's not a prank. There's a report inside the envelope. Michael took the report out of the envelope. It detailed David's actions. The other woman was Shelby, a 24-year-old colleague in the same department as David. Shock and anger welled up. What are you doing? Having an affair with a woman not much older than your son. Are you out of your mind? Robert angrily questioned David with a filled voice. David shrank back. Normally a gentle person, when angry, he radiated an intense vigor. You spend your salary on this. Abuse it on something better. David had no excuse and began shouting nonsense. Anger and confusion enveloped the family. It's Dad's fault for using money like this. Ray's apologized to Mom. My mother-in-law, Patricia, raised her voice and started to cry. I raised him wrong, so he became like this. Patricia, forgive me. It's not your fault. Susan, I helped her up. It's partly my fault too. Susan, you didn't do anything wrong. David, explain yourself. David, seemingly resigned, began to talk about his affair. He said Shelby had joined the company the year before last. David had become in charge of her as the trainer for the new employee. Chin at home. David was blunt, but outside he always portrayed a cheerful man, never without a smile. It seemed only a matter of time before Shelby was attracted to such a David. Perhaps she was influenced by David's behavior, and a little crush had developed. She seemed to find young men unsatisfactory. She was attracted to David, who was a bit of a bad boy. Being of a bad boy, probably because of her family background. Shelby grew up in a single-mother household, probably longing for a fatherly figure in her life. Maybe she was waiting for an invite from her husband. It seems they became romantically involved quickly. It appears she really did get a job at the corporate office. They started living together after renting an apartment. To afford the apartment, they had to cut down on their expenses. He was worried I'd cheat on him because he was cheating on me. This resulted in those persistent evening calls. Even though he was cheating, he couldn't bear the thought of me doing the same. Such a selfish way of thinking, in my opinion. Though I never had any intention to cheat on him. I'm cutting ties with you. I'll hire an excellent lawyer for Patricia, and I'll make sure you pay the maximum amount in property division. Get out of this house right now? Betrayed nullity in the face of Robert's anger. My husband fled like a scared animal. Robert and Susan kept apologizing to me. Don't worry, Patricia. We'll handle everything. We'll also support you financially. You don't have to go to such lengths. I still have Michael with me. That's right. Grandpa doesn't have to do anything. Oh, I won't be satisfied unless I help out. Just let us handle it. Patricia, in reality, I didn't even have money for a consultation with a lawyer, so I had no choice but to rely on their offer. Everything progressed smoothly. My husband was head over heels in love with Shelby. It seemed he was okay with losing everything as long as he had Shelby. The divorce proceedings moved forward, and his infidelity and financial abuse were confirmed, resulting in him having to pay not only property division, but also a settlement. The amount of property division was significant, especially considering he didn't provide for my living expenses. By paying the property division, he was left with almost no money, and I got the house. Robert and Susan decided to take care of the mortgage on the house as a part of their apology. Shelby, my husband's mistress, was also asked to pay a substantial amount of money. Shelby had been saving up for her dream, but now all that money would go toward the alimony. She seemed devastated. She tried to get David to help her out, but he declined. Can't help if he doesn't have the money. She became mentally unstable and quit her job to return to her family home. I don't feel directly responsible for what happened to Shelby, but it still pains me. I regret demanding alimony from Shelby in my anger. You shouldn't worry about it. Hyman, there's nothing we can do. You just have to move on. Wrinkle is right. But my heart aches. Her family's on a remote island in Florida, and David can't easily visit. Moreover, it's a small community, so who knows what kind of rumors would spread if David showed up. It seems she's made it clear she doesn't want him visiting. After the divorce, to me, David is just a stranger who happens to share a name with my ex-husband. Whatever he does in his apartment is none of my business. He should just live his own life, but his obsessive nature is just too much to handle. I messed up. Please take me back. I realized your worth only after losing you. Shelby was just a fling. David keeps calling me over and over. Actually, I just let him talk, then hang up without saying a word. From what he says, his place seems pretty filthy. He once sent me a picture of his apartment, and it looked like the stench would come out of the screen. I deleted it immediately. They took me off sales duty. I've been messing up a lot, and people say my clothes stink. It's all because of you. It's sickening to think I was once married to this guy. How are you gonna take responsibility? After getting caught cheating, from being the top salesperson, now I'm being sidelined to documentation. It's as if they're telling me to quit. Can't he see that it's all his fault? I wonder how many times he's gonna blame others before he's satisfied. Is David even sane anymore? One day, David called again. I'm coming over tonight, be ready. He hung up abruptly. I was terrified. What's David capable of? I hesitated but called Michael, who was on a business trip. Just lock the front door and don't go outside, no matter what. How is he planning to help while being on a business trip? Regardless, I locked all the doors, including the front one, and put on the chain. It's make foul. I was too scared to even turn on the lights. While I was trembling in fear, the doorbell suddenly rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Someone was banging on the door fiercely. I know you're in there. Brayden, open up. It can't. David's shouting terrified me, and I crouched down in fear. And I heard voices arguing outside, followed by silence. Just when the doorbell rang again. I saw Robert on the intercom monitor. I rushed to the door and opened it. You can rest easy. I've driven David away. I collapsed in relief right there, crying. My flustered father-in-law followed, then my mother-in-law came in. Don't worry anymore, we won't let him near Patricia. I had them sit down, and while serving tea to them, I thanked them. It's not for Patricia to apologize. We're the ones to blame for raising such a son. My in-laws had come because Michael had contacted them. They'd apparently been hiding in the shadows, waiting for David to appear. Fixed tomorrow. I'm gonna have a talk with David. A captain I know is looking for someone. He works in deep sea fishing, and once you're on the boat, you can't return to the States for a year. We've got to get him on that boat to straighten him out. He's going to listen to us. Given such a foolish son is still our dear child. Just think of us as foolish parents and have a laugh. Any parent finds their children dear, of course. Patricia, you must have been concerned about David's mistress. Shelby, right, the money has been returned. She seemed fine. I'm sorry for the trouble. It must have been hard, being so far away. And the money? No, keep the money, please. Otherwise, we won't feel right about it. Sometime later, I heard from my father-in-law that David had gotten on the ship. Whether David reforms or not is no longer my concern. There, now the thematician. I'm happy that Michael can participate in a big project at his company, and I hope for nothing but success there. So my relationship with my ex-in-laws is good, and they still visit from time to time. You're still young, Patricia. It's too early for you to grow old. Actually, there is someone I've started dating. It's Bob from the company. Just with my husband's infidelity. I just thought he was a nice person. Going to work every day and talking with Bob. I found myself feeling at peace, but it took a little time to realize that feeling was something more. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. But now that I'm divorced, I can face that feeling honestly, and I confessed. Then, Bob also confessed that he fell for me at first sight during the interview, like the changing of the seasons. Spring has come to me again. Why didn't you mention that before? And if you're a pro, you don't need to attend a class. You just wanted to show off in front of everyone, didn't you? At Karen's words, I felt the pent-up emotions I had been holding onto for so long were about to spill out. I think I was frustrated with her for always picking on me, but with a smile. I was like, wow, I didn't intend to flaunt that I'm a professional, and even though I'm a violinist, I don't have the knowledge to teach, so I just sought guidance in the classroom. My name is Michelle. Since Katie's birth, I've been a stay-at-home mom. I used to work, and it was quite a unique job. Robert was like, since it's our first time raising a kid, why don't you take it easy for a while? So, I decided to take a break from work. Robert has always cherished me and has been committed to our relationship. After Katie was born, he's been proactive in helping with child rearing. Whenever I felt overwhelmed, he'd get the household chores to help me out. I deeply love Robert, and having Katie has made our life even happier. Vitis, Mom, I want to learn the violin. One day, Katie excitedly said this when she got home from her preschool. Apparently, a few of her friends had started attending music classes, and she seemed to be inspired by them. The preschool Katie attends is pretty well known in San Francisco, and they offer various activities. As a result, there are numerous extracurricular classes in our area, and most kids there are engaged in some sort of activity. Of course, I'd been thinking about enrolling Katie in a class, but didn't want to push her into something she wasn't interested in. But when she expressed her desire, after some discussion, we decided to enroll her in a music school near our home and her preschool. When we discussed it, Robert was like, "That's great violin hum. It's perfect for Katie." With a smile. He probably imagined Katie playing the violin on stage. When I told Katie the good news, both she and Robert were ecstatic. Thus, Katie began her journey at the music school. However, there was an issue lurking at the school. The school offered courses not only for violin, but also for piano, guitar, and other instruments, catering to children's ages and levels. They mainly target kids from preschools to early elementary age, and older kids attend their affiliated schools. Of course, given its proximity to the preschool, many of Katie's friends, classmates, and other kids from the same preschool attended. Many of Katie's preschool mates attended this music school. I've often met familiar mothers there, which gave me a sense of comfort as Katie and I started attending. Since the school is relatively big, there are numerous teachers. Consequently, parents often mingle outside the classrooms while waiting. The mothers and I regularly saw each other during the scheduled class times. So we naturally got to know each other and formed a group of about 10 mothers. Among them was someone who could be called the alpha mom. It was Karen. Karen is the mother of a boy named Harry who takes piano lessons. Harry and Katie are in the same class, so I knew Karen by face. To be honest, I wasn't too fond of her. She was quite ostentatious, always showing off her flashy clothes and luxury brands while other moms dressed more casually. She was often like, "You gotta look good, right?" with a smug smile. Sure, affected by any tensions between the parents, we maintained a superficial relationship. However, a particular incident made me the target of Karen's ire. It began during a casual conversation with the other mothers. One of the mothers mentioned how amazing it is that kids pick up new skills quickly. I tried playing after a long time and was shocked at how rusty I was. There's a fair number of moms who used to play musical instruments and think it's beneficial, so they have their kids attend music school. Given that many of the mothers used to play musical instruments, this was a common sentiment. Hearing this boastfully, Karen said, "You guys can't play. I've been playing since my childhood and can still play just fine." Most of us gave her an awkward smile, but a few moms praised her, feeding her ego. Seeing her revel in the attention was almost laughable. Beyond by the praises, Karen continued to speak. "It's kind of sad, isn't it, when kids are practicing and parents can't teach them? I think they'd improve more not just in the classroom, but if parents closely watch during practice, don't you think?" Well, there's some truth to that. I didn't understand why she was boasting about it. I always believed that kids progress by working hard and enjoying the process. What's the point of parents bragging about playing an instrument? These thoughts. I looked at her. She was like, "What about you all?" And everyone responded. Mainly they didn't want to upset her, and most people were modest and they were like, "I played a bit back in the day." I wasn't sure how to respond. Seeing my hesitation, Karen started targeting me with a smart, "How are you, Michelle?" Well, caught off guard. I couldn't answer properly. Seeing this, Karen sneered even more. "Well, it seems like you can't play, can you?" Violin might need more skill than piano, but if you can't play the piano, there's no way you can play the violin. I almost sighed at her condescending attitude. I never said I couldn't play, but she seemed to have made up her mind. Nobody else challenged her loud laughter. No one wanted to become her next target. The thing is, I can actually play the violin, and while I'm at it, the piano too. I started taking violin lessons after watching a music show with both instruments. That's how I fell in love with music, and even attended a music college. But I never felt the need to tell everyone that I'm a graduate who can play both. Well, Karen, I haven't practiced as intensely as you, so I'm not that skilled. That's obvious. That's comparing me to someone who hasn't practiced wouldn't make sense. I was even about to give her a respectful look. Respectful look because of her selfish interpretation, but she kept going on. Also, I asked my husband to buy a special piano just for practice at home since I think it's necessary for the lessons. What about you all? The other moms shared their situations. Instruments are expensive, and there's no guarantee that the lessons will continue. Perhaps that's why there's so much consultation and discussion before making a purchase. The moms would state reasons, and some of them were like, we live in an apartment. Some moms were like, well, we have a guitar. I guess. Michelle, violins are pricey, so I assume you couldn't get a special one. Feeling a bit provoked, I replied honestly, actually, I have one. But it's probably a cheap one, right? I just smiled at her excessive comment. However, she shocked me by asking, hey, can you show us your violin? The ones at the studio are probably expensive, right? I want to know the difference between the sounds of a cheap one and a high-end one. I was speechless. When I hesitated, Karen, with a sly smile, continued, actually, we'll just come over to your place. You live in that big house, right? I'd been curious about it. I was almost like, oop at her insinuating comment. The other moms were like, I've been curious too. I tried to stop it, but since the majority there agreed, I couldn't decline. Things escalated quickly, and soon Karen suggested we have a mini concert at my place. They were like, if you have a spacious house and instruments, it should be fine to play during the day, right? With everyone agreeing, it was hard to decline. In the end, we decided to hold a casual music gathering at my place. Everyone was excited, bringing snacks and even planning to have their kids join in. At first, I wasn't thrilled about it, but I saw it as a chance for the kids to enjoy music. When I told the whole story to Robert, he laughed and was like, moms have it tough, huh? But show them what you've got. Michelle, she's gonna regret underestimating you. Surprisingly, the one I might fear the most could be the husband. The funniest part was Katie, and she was like, mom's the best, which made me blush. And on the day they were expected, I greeted the mothers and children who gathered in front of my house. Welcome, everyone. I may not offer much in the way of hospitality. We were expecting anything fancy. Although Karen always had a tendency to be critical, the other mom seemed a bit surprised and addressed me. Your house is quite impressive. Michelle, really, the design is wonderful. Thank you. Perhaps finding this unamusing. Karen audibly huffed and turned away. I truly wondered who the real child was here as I guided them into one of the rooms. Everyone's expressions changed. That's a huge piano, just like the ones in the music schools. Before the moms could say anything, the children burst out in excitement, their eyes shining brightly as they gazed at the grand piano in the room. The room I showed them was soundproof and spacious, with a grand piano placed inside. This space was designed when we moved in here. Robert was like, Michelle should definitely have a place to relax and play music. I remember shedding tears of joy when I was surprised by this. The piano itself was a gift from Robert's father when the house was being built. Given that my father-in-law was in the music business, he seemed pleased to offer it. Although initially, I felt it was too grand a gift. Kim's like, I truly don't deserve this. But he was like, all I wish is for you to make beautiful music here. It'll be wonderful if it can serve its purpose when we have grandchildren. Your piano is huge. Teddy, for someone not majoring in piano, it's impressive. Seriously, my house just has a much smaller piano. Listening to the words of the children and Harry, Care had a look of envy. By smaller piano, she probably meant an upright or digital one. I thought that was enough, but maybe her pride just couldn't accept it. Wait, there are smaller pianos than this? Katie, during her violin practice, always used a grand piano in the classroom. She probably had never seen any other kind of piano. Of course, she must have encountered digital pianos in places like preschool, but she might see them as different. But having such a big piano is meaningless if you can't play it. And Katie, you're in violin, right? So what a waste. Anyway, let's put this piano to good use. Thus began the music session initiated by Karen. Alice in the guitar class mostly brought their own, and they were like, well, there are cheaper ones out there. And for the violin class, not many had their own, but since I had one for practice, I lent it out. The moms showcased what could be considered the fruits of their practice. Songs like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Stars, and Edda Perka echoed, played with all the hard work from amateurs to those with experience. The kids, however, seemed less interested, diving into the snacks that were brought and beginning to play. Then it was Karen's turn. She took a seat at the piano, took a deliberately deep breath, and placed her hands on the keys. The other moms knew they had to pay close attention to a performance, knowing the potential fallout later if they didn't. And the piano slowly came to life. Upon hearing the notes, including myself, the moms frowned a bit. For someone who bragged so much about her skills, Karen's playing honestly wasn't that great and felt somewhat disjointed. Frankly, some of the other moms probably played the piano better. The classical piece she chose also sounded rather crude because it didn't match her skill level. Even the children were like, that's a strange piece, isn't it? As Karen finished her piece, we all clapped and were like, that was amazing. With a smug look, she was like, I guess I'm just not used to this piano. I couldn't play as well as I usually do. I found that hard to believe since the piano's keys moved so smoothly. The thought crossed my mind, but I just clapped without saying a word. Finally, it was my turn, with a triumphant smirk. But Collerin was like, now it's your turn. Michelle is and she still thought I wasn't able to play well, perhaps contemplating how to criticize my performance. First off, with such a pristine environment and the presence of a grand piano and violin, I wondered how one could think that I couldn't play at all. With that thought, I fetched a case from the storage inside the soundproof room. Everyone looked on with curiosity, and I took a violin out of it. She could, oh, that violin is, oh yeah. I just thought I'd be more comfortable with this one. The moms were surprised by my words and couldn't respond. Leaving that be, I began to prepare mentally. What should I play? Honestly, as I was thinking this, little Katie approached. She seemed to have noticed that I was getting ready to play the violin. Mom, can you play the one you always play for me? Oh, gotcha. Honoring Katie's request, I began to slowly draw my bow across the violin strings. The piece Katie was referring to was the theme song of a kids' TV show that airs on Sundays. I started playing it slowly, but as the chorus approached, I picked up the pace. The kids seemed to recognize the tune and started expressing their amazement. They were like, oh, that's amazing. I played with enthusiasm, transitioning into a medley of other familiar songs from children's shows. The violin might lack the grandeur of a piano, but I added more pieces to make sure it wasn't too plain. The children clapped along. After about 10 minutes of performance, I began the outro. How can you play so many songs? I want to play too. The moms gathered around and were like, that was truly spectacular. Aminoa just praised my skills. Echoing. I was like, thank you. Harry was like, hey, why is Katie's mom so skilled? You're like a pro. And the other moms nodded in agreement. At that, Katie blurted out, well, my mom is a pro, huh? What do you mean by pro-ship? The room was filled with astonishment. Wait, Michelle, you're a professional violinist. John Ramathagsbabri? Oh yeah, technically. I'd taken a break from performing because of child-rearing. I used to be active as a violinist. Karen, cutting off the compliments from the other moms and kids, burst out, why didn't you say that earlier? If you're a pro, there's no need for you to attend classes. You just wanted to show off and steal the spotlight, didn't you? Karen's words made me feel a rush of emotions that I had been holding up until that time. I'd always been annoyed by her baseless accusations. I didn't want to flaunt the fact that I'm a pro. And while I am a violinist, I don't have the expertise to teach, which is why I sought guidance at the music school. So you've been a housewife while claiming to be so busy. Don't you have time? Like I said earlier, I've taken a break from concerts for a while to focus on raising my child. Plask. I managed to practice well at home. Care had nothing to say in response. The other moms began to discuss, and they were like, that performance was really something else. None of us could compare. Feeling left out, Care remained silent for the rest of the gathering. In the end, after a lively discussion with the moms, we called it a day. Karen glared at me resentfully. But considering she orchestrated this, it was all her doing, having cleared up the misunderstandings. I felt more at ease chatting with the other moms at the preschool and the music school. It was a positive change brought about by this event. Karen stopped bothering me after that. I thought the matter was settled until I heard a shocking story later on. Karen apparently vented to her husband about the day's events. She was like, she flaunted her skills just to embarrass me. But her husband retorted angrily and was like, it's because you're always so superficial. You're probably the one at fault. Karen seemed to try to make an excuse, but Harry was like, Mom, please stop. It's embarrassing. One day at the preschool, Bree was like, all my mom has is pride. Because of that, it seemed to have gotten out about this story. People were already fed up with Karen's high level of pride, and she was reportedly given an ultimatum that if she continues to be a nuisance, they might get divorced. Erin, who was truly heartbroken, became surprisingly quiet after that. She stopped trying to one-up others in class, and would just nod at me and move along. I felt a bit relieved to finally have some peaceful days. I was always on edge in the classroom because Karen was there. Seeing her so humbled, I realized that even someone with immense pride can change. My Mr. Cat, I was praised today. That's great, you're getting better and better. Yeah, I want to practice more and become a pro like you. If anyone can do it, it's you, Teddy. Now with Robert, we're cheering for Katie's dreams. Whether it's in the classroom or at the preschool, life has become much more relaxed, and we're living happily. Now that things have settled down a bit, while enjoying these fulfilling days, I'm gonna keep doing my best as a mom. I've reached my limit. I deeply regretted my grandmother's words. Why did I take my grandmother with me back then? Why didn't I try to meet her earlier, even if it meant forcing the issue? I held her frail hand that had become just skin and bones. Not knowing what to do, I reached out to someone. While waiting in the hospital corridor, I got a call from Marianne. What's going on with her? Why has Grandma lost so much weight? Well, idle folks can't expect luxuries like meals. If you don't work, you don't eat, you know? My grandmother had always worked so hard for us. Certainly harder than Marianne, who's always lazing around. There's something I gotta say. What is it? You're gonna have to take care of that old granny? That. Marianne hung up. If she felt that way, then I'd take care of her. From then on, I took care of my grandmother with all my might. At first, my grandmother looked sorry for us, but over time, she started to recover. We need to give those idiots a piece of our mind. My name is Alicia Sutton, a 28-year-old single woman living at my family home with my grandmother, Josie. I have a brother named Michael and a grandfather who's hospitalized. Our parents passed away in a car accident when I was in middle school. Don't worry, Alicia and Michael. Your grandparents will always protect you. With that, my grandmother held me until I stopped crying. I remember my grandfather comforting Michael by patting his back. From then on, we were taken in by our grandparents. Losing their only son and suddenly taking in two growing grandchildren must have been tough on them. Well, I actively helped out my grandparents. Michael, who was in high school at the time, started to clash with grandfather. I never wanted to come to this rural place in the first place. It seemed Michael couldn't accept the fact that he had to transfer schools because of the move. That being said, I wouldn't say my grandparents' place is that rural. It's in a regular suburban neighborhood with no transportation issues. However, where we used to live, there were places to hang out nearby, but after moving in with my grandparents, those places became distant. Probably why he wasn't too pleased. Gradually, he'd come home late, even staying out all night during high school, leading to big arguments with my grandfather. When he went off to college, he left home and started ignoring all messages from us. I was planning on going to college too, but just before that, my grandfather had a health scare. Michael took the money that was saved for my college when he left, so my grandfather worked hard trying to earn it back. So, I started working right after high school and took turns with my grandmother caring for my grandfather. My grandmother, having been a housekeeper in the past, took care of all the house chores, which allowed me to focus on my job, making ends meet. Alicia, don't overdo it. Remember to take care of yourself even when working. Thanks, but I'm enjoying my job, so I'm okay. The one who helped me was a neighbor. It's Robert Smith. He became a doctor, but his father is a company CEO. Thanks to Robert's efforts, I got a job in his father's company straight out of high school. Extra. I even have a decent position there and owe a lot to Robert. Alicia, the hospital just called. Your grandpa's condition has suddenly worsened. One day, my grandfather's health deteriorated and he never woke up again. I asked Michael to come and at least see our grandfather during his final moments or for the funeral, but he didn't even show up, let alone reply. I was furious at Michael, but supporting my grieving grandmother was my priority. Michael finally showed up when we had finished dealing with our grandfather's possessions and things had calmed down emotionally. Hey, long time no see. Wait, Michael? Is that really you? Forgot what your brother looks like. That's heartless. That's rich coming from you. Showing up now of all times? I confronted Michael, but he just brushed it off. Then, from behind him, a flamboyantly dressed woman popped out. Hello, you must be the doll little sister I've heard about. Excuse me, I'm Marianne. Technically, I'm your sister-in-law, but since I'm younger, I'll use polite words with you. Marianne's father is a CEO. She knows her manners. Their rudeness left me completely taken aback. A woman named Marianne was apparently Michael's wife. I didn't even know that Michael had gotten married, and I was very surprised to find out she's younger than me. So what can I do for you? My grandmother was still feeling down, so she was resting in her room. That's why I decided to talk with Michael in my grandmother's stead. Grandma's resting. She's lost someone dear to her. Whatever, just leave. What? What's he talking about? You'll probably never get married anyway. Mary Ann is pregnant. So what's that got to do with me? Grandma might want to take care of her great-grandchild, and we're gonna live here. You being here is a bother, and you might bring bad luck. So leave. Of course, I argued with Michael for saying such things. But when Michael and his wife started moving their things in and threw mine out, I reluctantly left. There was no way I could stand up to Michael, who was always boastful about his fights. Recently don't catch my computer. Got it. But take good care of Grandma. If you promise that, I'll leave quietly. I was gonna look after her anyway. Otherwise, all of my grandfather's assets went to my grandmother. The only asset was pretty much this house, so he probably moved in with the intention of getting it. I explained everything to my grandmother, who noticed the commotion and decided to leave the house with the essentials. I'm sorry, Richa. I promise to protect you. Don't worry about it. I'll be okay. My grandmother has been gentle and strict, while Robert has been the exact opposite. She doesn't like confrontations and tends to agree when pushed too hard. So driving Michael and his wife out would probably be tough. Still, I left in the heat of the moment. As I was wondering what to do, someone called my name. Hey, Robert. What's up? I got a call from Josie. You don't know where you're going, do you? Robert and my grandmother have been close enough to exchange contact details. That's probably why she reached out to him. Even though Robert must have been busy, he came over. I got things sorted on my end. Let's go. I'll carry your bags too. Saying that, I followed behind Robert, who kindly took my luggage. I knew things would be fine if I left them to Robert. What worried me more was leaving my grandmother behind at home. I was so filled with concern and anxiety. After settling down at my new place, I called my grandmother. Alicia, are you all right? Are you taking care of yourself? I'm fine, don't worry. But what about you, grandmother? Are you okay? Well, actually, my mother hesitated a bit, but then she told me about the situation at home. And as apparently, Mary Ann was using her pregnancy as an excuse to not do any house chores and just lazed around on the couch all day. Sometimes she even left in the afternoon and didn't come back until nighttime. What's Michael doing? He seems to be working, but he doesn't contribute any money. But moreover, Mary Ann says that since he can't earn much, I shouldn't complain. It seemed like Michael and Mary Ann were ganging up and being unfairly critical of my grandmother. I'm sorry for using it without asking. It's okay. Use the money in that account as you see fit. Thank you. I truly am sorry. Rachel. By the way, doing all the household chores at my age is really tough. Indeed, even though my grandmother can handle housework, she's already 75. When I had lived with her, we used to share chores once I got used to my job, but it seemed Michael and his wife were piling everything onto my grandmother. After ending the call with my grandmother, I called Michael, and it seemed to be his lunch break, so Michael answered pretty quickly. What is it? I heard from grandmother. You're not contributing money and pushing all the housework onto her, especially after we just lost grandfather. Shut up. We're the ones taking care of her. But you, with no marriage in sight, should just keep quiet. Hearing this, I was taken aback and pressed Robert for more details. Apparently, my grandmother had an accident with a bicycle on her way back from shopping and was taken to the hospital. So it just so happened that Robert, who's an orthopedic specialist, was assigned to her case, and the diagnosis was a broken leg. She had to stay in the hospital for a while, and she was just discharged the other day. Only Marianne came to pick her up. But moreover, Marianne was berating the grandmother, so Robert stepped in and intervened as he told me, Didn't you tell me sooner? I'm sorry. Josie asked me not to worry you and to keep it a secret until she was discharged. Also, I did inform your sister-in-law, Marianne, but she said you are too busy to come. So, Robert just took her word for it. I immediately reached out to my grandmother and Michael. However, I couldn't get through to either of them, so reluctantly I called Marianne, who responded with a clearly annoyed tone. Okay, it's you again? Why are you so persistent? I heard grandmother broke her leg. So wow, wonder who spilled the beans. Anyway, why is it any of your business? Of course it's my business. I'm going to vet home soon. I can't deal with you, so ask grandmother directly. Her attitude was, as usual, infuriating. I didn't want to leave grandmother in her care, but Marianne was like, you can't. If you want to visit her, pay a fee. $1 $100 an hour. If you can't pay, you can't see her. Marianne then hung up. I still went to my childhood home, but she pretended not to be home and turned me away, making it impossible to see my grandmother. My days of worry and frustration changed when I got a rare call from Michael. Hey, you still living that miserable life of yours? That's rude to just say out of the blue. Stop messing around and let me see grandmother. All right. Go ahead. I was taken aback by how easily he gave permission. I thought he was gonna say I'd never see her again, but Marianne has settled down a bit, so we're gonna take a trip. Hub, what? We're leaving that old lady, your grandmother, to you. Oh, and when you get to the house, make sure to clean up, okay? Thanks for the cash, by the way, Michael said and hung up. His talk about money and cleaning was confusing, but what surprised me more was them going on a trip and leaving my grandmother with a broken leg behind. I quickly headed to my childhood home. Grandma. The home was nothing like the tidy place my grandmother used to keep. It was a mess. Searched for my grandmother, trying not to let the mess bother me. I found my grandmother in a cramped room that had become a storage space. My grandmother was barely laid out on a mattress in there. I rushed over immediately. I've reached my limit. Hearing my grandmother say this, I was filled with immense regret. Why did I take my grandmother with me back then? Why didn't I forcefully try to see her sooner? I held her frail, bony hand, not knowing what to do. I reached out to someone for help. Josie. Robert came over as soon as I called for help. He gave my grandmother a quick examination and administered first aid. As we were doing that, an ambulance arrived and took my grandmother. But how did you get here faster than the ambulance? I was already in the area because I was worried about her. Robert always comforted me when I was overwhelmed with anxiety. He was waiting with me as my grandmother was being treated. While waiting in the hospital corridor, I received a call from Mary Ann. Oh, did you get to see Grandma? Why the heck are you asking me like that? What's going on with her? Why has Grandma lost so much weight? Well, idle folks can't expect luxuries like a meal. If you don't work, you don't eat, you know. My grandmother has worked hard all her life. Certainly more than Mary Ann, who mostly just lounged around. There's something else I wanted to tell you. What is it? I'm leaving Granny with you. Mary Ann hung up after saying that. If that's what she wants, I'll take care of her. After that, I took my grandmother in and cared for her with all my might. If you need anything, just let me know. In fact, after being kicked out of my parents' house, I had been staying with Robert. Whenever I tried to leave, Robert would stop me. Given my mental instability, we kinda ended up living together like a couple. He even agreed to take in my grandmother, and he's been helping with her care from then on. Initially, my grandmother seemed to feel guilty towards us, but gradually, she started to recover remarkably. I need to give a piece of my mind to those damn fools. She'd say that working hard at her physical therapy, so she might be able to move on soon. I've put you through so much. Robert looking after Grandma and all. Don't worry about it. For the woman I love and someone who's done so much for me, it's actually a pleasure. Actually, Bert had been trying to get closer to me for a while. I liked him too, but with my grandmother needing care, I kept a little distance from him. Just when I was finally ready to give him an answer, Michael and his crew showed up, so I still haven't given my response. It's turned out, Robert's parents are a busy CEO and lawyer, and when he was younger, a nearby grandmother used to take care of him. So he's helping out as a way to repay that kindness? Hey, the house is still a mess. I was pointed out about a month after taking in my grandmother when Michael finally reached out. He seemed to have been on a pretty long vacation, which was surprising. I told you to handle it, didn't I? I never said I'd do it. Besides, you think you can just leisurely contact me without any repercussions. What do you mean? Aren't you getting calls from the company? I could tell from the other end of the phone that Michael was taken aback. I couldn't help but laugh at his reaction. Why are you so shocked? I let Michael in on a little secret. You know, one of the big companies your firm deals with? That's where I work, and I happen to be good friends with the CEO. When I told him about this, he was furious and said he'd end the business relationship if he has an employee like you. Michael let out an almost inaudible scream. This deal was crucial for the future of Michael's company. If it's called off, the loss would be immense, and it's unimaginable what kind of repercussions Michael would face. Why on earth are you close with the CEO? Simple. I'm the next in line to become CEO. Will Robert chose a path in medicine. I was expected to take on the leadership role in the future. The company president and his wife have always shown me kindness, treating me as if I were their own daughter. I've heard everything from Grandma. Marianne took away Grandma's phone so she couldn't contact anyone, and Marianne took the money I sent home to use for her trip. I'll never forgive you too. Bye. With that, I hung up the phone. I blocked all their contact information. Finally letting out all the pent-up frustration felt so refreshing. I thought things would be peaceful for a while, but that wasn't the case. Oh, why are you here? As I left the office, Michael and Marianne were waiting for me. The two approached me quickly with grim expressions. We've been through hell because of you. And without waiting for a response, they started complaining. Apparently, due to this situation, Michael was heavily reprimanded by Marianne's father, who is the company president. Furthermore, in front of other employees, he was loudly blamed for occupying the home and for the issues with Grandma. Word spread throughout the company, and he was looked down upon by everyone. Given that Marianne's father is a sensible man, and because Michael, assuming he'd be the next company president, had a terrible work attitude, he got fired. You got what you deserve, right? Stop joking around. By the way, the reason they occupied the home was for Michael to join Marianne's father's company. They wanted to move here, but they didn't want to live in the strict house of Marianne's father. They figured our home was spacious enough, and they wouldn't need to spend money buying a new place. But because of you, we got kicked out of that house. The house was still under my grandmother's name, and in her anger over this whole situation, during Michael and Marianne's trip, Grandma sold the house. As a result, the two of them lost both their job and home almost immediately upon returning from the vacation. So what do you want from me? It's your fault, so help us out. Yeah, because of you, Dad's mad at us? Listening to the two of them whining for help was overwhelming. Do these two have no shame? You two sure are selfish. Oh, hey, Robert, good day. Alicia, thank you for all your hard work. Just then, Robert came along with my grandmother. Ever since the incident, my grandmother's recovered and been able to move around on her own if she was in a wheelchair. The look on my grandmother's face was pure anger. This dumb grandson of mine. You better not cause any more trouble for Alicia. Thanks to her surge of anger, my grandmother stood up and grabbed Michael by the collar. My grandmother has always been kind-hearted, but when angered, she's scarier than anyone else. Michael knew this all too well, so he let out a slight scream. You're no grandson of mine. I cut ties with you. Oh, same here. I don't want to think of you as my brother anymore. So I'm cutting ties with you right here and now. And I'm definitely not gonna help you guys out. First, at my words, Michael and his wife went pale. Oh, there's something important you both need to know. Robert helped my grandmother back into her wheelchair and gave a big, genuine smile. He was clearly upset about what happened, so Michael and his wife were probably in deep trouble. My dad's the CEO of this company, and my mom's a lawyer. They looked into you two after what happened. And during that, they found something out about you? Marianne, she made Robert's words. Marianne shuddered, and Michael gave a puzzled look. That baby you're carrying, it's not Michael's, is it? It's from your affair, right? Well, she was stammering. And I could tell Michael was taken aback. So what the hell is going on? Shut up. Did you really think I was serious about an old guy like you? Despite being in a public place, the two started to argue loudly. We just called the police and then left. A few minutes later, the couple was taken away by the police. Later, one of Robert's mom's colleagues sued the couple. They were taken in by the police and eventually charged with neglect. Mary Ann's father, a CEO on the other end, sincerely apologized for the trouble his daughter had caused. He promised not to abandon the two, so business dealings resumed. These two will surely face hell even after they're released. Several apology letters came to my grandmother and me from Michael, but we just read and tossed them away. My grandmother had burned letters from him several times without even reading them. Yet it seems Michael had divorced Mary Ann. Mary Ann's child has apparently taken in by some wealthy couple in New York. Since they claimed they'd raise the child properly without spoiling him, we decided to leave it in their hands for now. I have gifts for Elisa and Josie. The family estate that was on sale was bought by Robert. Thanks to Robert, the house filled with memories with my grandfather was saved. Furthermore, Robert decided to live in that house with my grandmother, and it really saved us. I just returned the favor. Besides, I wanted to be happy with Alicia. After that, I married Robert. We had been dating for only 6 months, but considering the long wait, it was quite fast. Still, we were very happy. Furthermore, I was promoted in my company, and I am now officially being trained under my father-in-law as the next CEO. Seeing me in my bridal attire, my grandmother seemed reinvigorated with the hope of seeing her great-grandchild and eventually started walking with a cane. Hey, what's up? Well, since I live in this house, I thought Michael and Mary Ann would come. Oh, my parents took care of that? Apparently, Michael tried to get in touch with us, but was taken somewhere by the employees who adore me under my in-laws. As for Mary Ann, she couldn't return home, couldn't meet her child, disappeared into the nightlife of New York, and her whereabouts remain unknown. Later on, I gave birth to a lovely son. The news set both my grandmother and my in-laws into a frenzy of excitement. The future of this boy is still uncertain, but I hope he grows up to be a kind man like Robert and not a troublemaker like Michael. I'm so blessed and happy. I genuinely smiled during those happy times. Robert, too, had a contented look on his face. When he grows up a bit more, we should all go somewhere for a vacation. If you say that, Grandma might get so excited she might start running again. Saying so, the time we spend laughing together is truly precious.